Jordan Rodgers, ESPN SEC Network, joining me here on the show. Jordan, appreciate you taking the time. I want your reaction to Nick Saban's SEC championship game prediction. Texas and Georgia. Do you think he's right?
Actually, that's the first time I'm hearing that. I think that's a good prediction. I would go Georgia Ole Miss. I'm really high and bullish on Ole Miss. Not just the talent that they have on offense returning. Juice Wells coming over from South Carolina 2 years ago. He was one of the best receivers in the SEC. But defensively, what they added, I think is finally going to allow this Ole Miss team to be balanced. Something we haven't seen in a long time, which is really scary for how good their offense can be.
One reason I spoke earlier on today's show about why I cast doubt on the Georgia-Texas matchup, both teams have really tough schedules.
Yeah.
You look at Georgia's schedule and Texas' schedule, two of the 3 or 4 toughest in the entire SEC. Which team you feel like is more capable of navigating that slate?
I think it's hard to bet against Georgia just because of how they recruit. And really, I said this yesterday, when that schedule gets dropped, every team, 15 teams in the SEC, go look, do we have to play Georgia? Georgia doesn't scurry on that day and go, who do we have to play? Like, everybody has to play Georgia. Now, on the Texas side, the reason I maybe lean more towards Georgia on that question is Texas got 3 draft picks at wide receiver they got to replace. 2 of them were 2 of the best in the entire country last year. I think Quinn Ewers is one of the best in the country as well, but you got new pieces on that side of the ball. I will say Sark as being one of the best play callers, the offense and defensive line, the way they've recruited, the size they have, they're going to compete. I mean, they're going to make a deep run on this thing, no doubt. I just think I'd let the 2-time national champions in the last 3 years, take the lead on that one.
You look at the SEC, and you've covered this league for a long time, and now there's a little bit of new buzz this week at SEC Media Days with Texas and Oklahoma. There are a lot of questions about Texas and Oklahoma that go to other schools about playing against them, recruiting against them. What was your initial reaction to Texas and Oklahoma joining the league?
I think it just elevates the tradition, the competitiveness, the talent, the passion of an SEC conference that was already the best in the entire country. So you got 2 amazing places to go to. I still have not been to Norman. That's the one place I'm excited to go see. I haven't been. I'm excited to go there. I've spent a lot of time in Austin, and we were there a couple weeks ago to kind of kick off this whole thing with Texas. There was like 30,000, 40,000 people there. I mean, it was unbelievable. So they're ready. Excited to get to Oklahoma. But it's 2 programs that are storied, that have tradition, and that immediately are going to compete in this conference, no doubt, in every single sport, let alone football.
They go from the Big 12 to the SEC. I think it's fair to assess that the level of physicality and defense is a step up. How do you think Texas and Oklahoma are preparing to adapt to that sort of transition?
Well, Sark, not that Brent Venables doesn't understand it, he absolutely does, but I think Sark was so pointed at recruiting the offensive and defensive line 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, really starting that process for this moment. Not that he knew or predicted that he was going to be here, but he knew that the line of scrimmage coming from Alabama was the most important thing in the entire country. So coaches that aren't in the SEC, before they come here, they kind of scoff at the idea that, it's so much harder. And look, there's good teams everywhere. The physicality is so underrated because you get beat up at the line of scrimmage every single week, no matter if it's Missouri or Kentucky. Those teams are as physical as anybody at the line of scrimmage. So I think that's what sneaks up on you. I think the added bye week, so each team's going to have 2, is really going to help in extending the livelihood of those guys up front and their bodies, keeping them healthy. But the line of scrimmage is definitely different in this league, and they'll need to adapt to that.
Speaking of scheduling, something that's being pondered, and there was a report from Ross Dellinger that it's going to be considered more after the season, which I think makes a lot of sense to see how the committee views SEC teams and their records in the 12-team playoff era. What do you make of a potential 9-game conference slate for the SEC? They currently played 8.
Yeah, I think they have to, and I think it'll happen at some point. Being selfish on my end, being on the broadcasting side, I want one more SEC game, just one more matchup. But I think you're right. Now that the playoff is so expanded, when you have a 1-loss SEC team, it didn't matter they only played 8. When it was a college football playoff of 4, like, they're probably going to make it if they're a champion, right? That's just how it is. Now that there's 12, that strength of schedule and who you play from those spots 9 to 12 are going to be really important because there's going to be a lot of similarities between a lot of those teams that are maybe sitting at 10-2, right? And some have a tough strength of schedule and some don't. So I think that's only exaggerated with the 12 teams now. So I think the SEC will do what's right. Greg Sankey always has the future in his mind. He's always thinking with great foresight. They'll get there, and I hope they get there sooner rather than later.
I asked a member of the college football playoff who led off the remarks earlier today at SEC Media Days about how they're going to balance that strength of schedule, record, and all those factors. And it was kind of a non-answer. It was
always is.
It was.
It always is.
Yeah, it somewhat is. I don't think it's necessarily the wrong mindset, though, to say we're going to consider this, we're also going to consider that, but I do think it has to be team dependent. I was actually kind of pleased to hear that he didn't have a uniform response of, yeah, we're going to value this more, we're going to value that more, because this record, like, you're not where your record says you are.
Yeah.
You might have a much easier strength of schedule, even within the SEC.
Totally.
Every schedule is different.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges, and I've sat in those mock college football playoff committee meetings. It's really hard. It's harder than you think, and at times, you apply one metric to a group of 2 or 3 teams, and you kind of have to apply another metric to a different group of 2 or 3 teams just based on the context. And I think that's important. One standard is not going to fit across the board, right? I mean, this is a nuanced sport. Every game is different. Every environment is different. Playing on the road at certain places is easier than others, at night versus in the day. I mean, there's so many factors that go into this thing. So the human element is needed, but that also means there's always going to be controversy with that 13, 14, 15 team that ends up getting left out.
I think we could have a 2014 playoff like the FCS.
Let's go. Come on.
You'd still have controversy.
Oh, you would, absolutely.
Yeah, oh, no, I'm not going for the 2014 playoff. I would have to go for a mental hop, skip, and a jump for me to get there. But 2 questions to get you out of here on Jordan. One of them, got to ask you about just, you've been around the SEC a lot. You've gone to different stadiums. You've been all around. Is there a favorite place that you have to go to experience a game day environment? I know there are a lot of great ones, and just so we're clear, just because he picks one doesn't mean he doesn't like your team and your stadium.
But yeah, Twitter, X, they never remember that, so
no,
it is what it is. I'm going to give you 2 different answers to that. The day pregame experience, you got to go to the Grove, Oxford. I don't think there's anything like it. And just being a California boy that grew up going to every Pac-10 stadium at the time, now they're not Pac-12 anymore. They're nothing anymore. But it's different. Like, people dress up, there's chandeliers and tents, and it's just, the pageantry is crazy. So that was really fun for a California boy that, yes, played in the SEC, but now since I'm on the other side of it, getting to go and enjoy those things, there's nothing like that. And then Death Valley at night, I think, is so special. Like, it is everything it's cracked up to be. I'll give you an undercover one, though. One of my favorite places at night to go do a game is actually Columbia, South Carolina. Like, Sandstorm playing before I mean, it gets wild. It's not 100,000 people. Yeah. It's 60-something, but it gets as crazy and as hostile as almost anywhere in the SEC. So that's one place that everyone's like, oh, really, South Carolina? I'm like, no, you got to go to a game at night there. It's different.
That feels like if I asked you the question about the ACC, then the answer might be Virginia Tech. You know,
one
that kind of flies under the radar.
Totally.
Enter Sandman, great tradition. Lastly, you're a Vanderbilt grad. I know Vanderbilt doesn't have high hopes in football. They've got the lowest win total in the SEC this year.
Kick me while I'm down, but yeah.
Do you have a sense of what to expect from your Commodores this season? Can they go over that 2.5 win total?
I think they can, and there's hope because of the changes they made, right? I mean, Clark Lee's never going to be allowed in Las Cruces, New Mexico again, because he went there, he took their former head coach, he took their offensive coordinator, and he took their starting quarterback, and he ran out of there like a bandit. When I flip on the New Mexico State, Tim Beck and his offense that he's bringing to Vandy, kind of reminds me of what we did in 2011 as we really started to turn that corner, get to our first bowl game before going to back-to-back bowl games. I was not really developed as a passer, and we ran me a lot. I ran 15, 16 times a game, quarterback design runs, finding creative ways to steal yards. Because at Vandy, you're never going to line up against an SEC team and be more talented. That's just the fact. Doesn't mean you can't win. We won 9 games being the less talented team every time we step on an SEC field, but you have to find ways to get creative. And when I look at this offense, it's going in that direction. So yeah, they're not going to flip the switch and win 6, 7, 8 games next year, but I think this is the start of some momentum and a path to get back to that.
Jordan Rodgers, ESPN, SEC Network. Jordan, thanks for the time.
For sure, man.